I just want to draw your attention to the item on the filming protocol. I'll take a brief introduction from members and the co-optees and the officers who are present online and here in person. I will start with my left, Anna.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Anna Abel. I'm the councillor for Haringey Ward.
Hi, I'm Sue Jameson, Bruce Castle Ward.
I'm Yvonne Denny from the London Diocesan Board.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bev Hendricks, Assistant Director for Safeguarding Children in Haringey.
Hello, I'm Tim Miller. I'm a Joint Assistant Director for Commissioning between North Central London ICB and Haringey Council for Adults and Children's Services.
Good evening, I'm Mary Jarrett, I'm Head of SEND Services at the Council.
I'm Zena Brabazon, Cabinet Member, Children's Schools and Families.
Good evening, everyone. Anne Graham, Director of Children and Young People Services. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Jackie DeFalco, Assistant Director for Early Help Prevention and SEND.
Hi, I'm Rob Mack, Scrutiny Support Officer.
Now we'll go to the screen. I can see Lords, Councillor Gosling, and yeah, please introduce.
Hello, I'm Lourdes Kiva. I'm a co-opted member and I represent the Diocese of Westminster.
Hello there, my name is Marsha Isla Gosling. I am a councillor for Highgate Ward.
Amanda.
Hi, good evening. I'm Amanda Bernard, Chair of Send Power in Haringey, Parent Carer Forum.
Jean.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Jean Taylor. I'm the Head of Policy and Strategy at Haringey Council.
Thank you, everyone, for that. Any apologies for absence, Rob?
No, Chair.
Right, thank you. Items of urgent business.
None.
Item 4, declaration of interest. This is for members to consider the statement on the agenda of the front pack. If you have any declaration of interest, please do declare them. Deputation, petition, presentations and questions.
None, Chair.
Okay. Item 6 is the minutes of the last meeting. Minutes of the meeting on 23rd of March. Any comments or about the minutes? Are we happy to approve them? Approved. Item 7 is the terms of reference for the membership. So this being the first meeting of this municipal year, we need to agree to the terms of reference for the membership of the panel.
Yeah, it's just for noting the terms of reference and the scope of all the scrutiny bodies are agreed by overview and scrutiny committee. So the reports outline the membership, terms of reference, the scope. It's also got the protocol in there and how the cabinet protocol portfolios line up against the various scrutiny bodies. As I say, it's just for noting. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Any question from anyone? Are we happy to note? Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Item 8 is appointment of non-voting co-opted members.
Yes, Chair, this is another piece of housekeeping. our non-voting co-opted members have to be appointed at the start of every municipal year. The one non-voting co-opted member that we have on the panel is the representative of Haringey Send Parents Carer Forum, who's Amanda Bernard, and she's indicated that she's happy to be reappointed again this year. So it's for the panel to agree to this.
Are we happy to reappoint Amanda for this year? Thank you. Yes. Item 9 is cabinet member questions. Children's Councillor Brabazon is here with us, and her remit is on children's, schools and families. Councillor Brabazon, do you want to give a brief presentation? Then we'll take some, or just give us a brief update of what you've been doing for last couple of months. Then we'll have ask question.
Sorry, I've got a visitor at home and I rushed out to come here, and so I'm a bit disoriented because I was sorting out my visitor. You've got the Ofsted inspection report on the agenda, and you've got safety valve update on the agenda. You've also had a member session which went into great detail about safety valve. So I sort of feel that those two major things are being covered, and I don't propose to repeat any of that. I'm sure members came to the event on safety valve, and so you would have been apprised of it. If not, we've got the paperwork in the pack. Suffice to say, it's a huge programme which we can't afford to fail. That's, I think, the key issue of safety valve. We cannot afford to fail on this, and we have to work with our schools and partners. If you want my update, you'll know that we've launched Get Haringey Talking. I keep calling it the wrong thing, but it's Get Haringey Talking, which is a speech and language project for focused on families with children under 5, and the launch was at Bruce Castle Park the other week. There's 2 other events at Campsbourne, and I keep forgetting the other park. Russell Park in Knoll Park, yes. And I think Campsbourne is this week on the 29th. So if you can get along, it was absolutely lovely. At Bruce Castle, it was absolutely punishingly hot, but fantastic turnout. And this is long overdue, this campaign, and certainly something which we need to be bringing to the attention of Tim's here, the Integrated Care Board and the North London Board in relation to resources that are given to Haringey. I know that many of us are on a mission to secure additional funding for the borough, and that this is something which is probably moving up certainly up my agenda, and I think possibly up Anne's agenda as well. We are expecting at some point, I think next few months, maybe, Jackie, an inspection on our youth justice service. And I can report to you that I went to the most splendid away day the other day with the youth justice service at Alexandra Palace. It was a bit hot. But that notwithstanding, being in a greenhouse, it was a terrific event where staff presented to each other about their work. And if you ever thought you needed consultants to come in and tell you about your work, I think that was testament that we don't. It was a really good, interesting insight into our youth justice service, which not huge, luckily, not large numbers of young people, but incredibly focused work, incredibly demanding on the staff. And we heard all different elements of it. And it was an absolute, I have to say, it was a real pleasure to go. I said about Get Talking Haringey. On Wednesday, we're launching the hub, the family hub at the Triangle. And I'm sure, Jackie, you wouldn't mind if I extend an invite to members of the committee to come. I think it's 11 o'clock.
It's 11 to 1.
11 till 1 at the Triangle on St Anne's Road. This is our first hub, family hub, and there will be 4. We're funded by the government to the tune, I think, of 3.8 million over the next few years. And we are very, very optimistic that this is going to be a whole new adventure in partnership working. I mean, we have been there before because we were a Sure Start trailblazer. So we're not starting with a blank sheet. We have known how to do this sort of work over many, many years. There's a conference of the Haringey Safeguarding Children's Partnership tomorrow, but it clashes with lots and lots of cabinet things. So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get there, but the Safeguarding Partnership, obviously really important in terms of the partnership structures. And on Thursday, Anne and I will be going to the Head Teachers Conference, which is an annual event, and we will be making, giving our presentations. We had an away afternoon with the Haringey Education Partnership, which was very helpful in exploring roles and exploring where their strategic plan was going. I think we can say with some pleasure that the white paper forcing local authorities, forcing schools or trying to pressure schools into maths and academisation is now a distant memory, a happy and distant memory. And that over the last couple of months, I think we've shown what the difference is to be part of a local authority family of schools rather than to be in a chain or a mat or outside of a local authority, with some of the problems that have arisen with concrete in schools, which is a national problem, which the government instructed local authorities to go and investigate where this might be. It's in 1970 builds, so not in schools like West Green, which is Edwardian, or Bruce Grove, but the late 1970s buildings. And this is a national problem. I think government is very, very worried about this. And so all local authorities, and I can say Haringey's absolutely been in front of the effort to support schools. And so I've signed off, for example, 1.3 million for porta cabins for Parkview. Had Parkview been in a chain or an academy, I doubt any of that would have happened. Certainly not with the speed and the commitment that our officers have shown to our schools. There's all sorts of ways you support our schools, and that's just one of them. Rather than bore you anymore, I hope I haven't, I'll take questions.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Zina. Obviously, yeah, we will have, I'm sure members and the co-opted members have lots of different questions. I want to I've got a couple of my own questions before I kind of start bringing other people, other colleagues in. In terms of, like you've mentioned at the beginning of your speech, that there's 2 important things that happened in regards to children's services in Haringey. The offset, obviously findings, the result, which was a good result, by the way. Congratulations to all of you for working so hard and making finally, like moving Haringey from needing improvements to a good standards, which is really welcoming. The second one you said is safety valve. That you mentioned that it's something that we cannot fail. Like it has to be a success because obviously the stakes are high. It's going to reduce the deficit over the years, and it's also going to help our children and children with SEND, like more services and better services. I mean, I kind of like wanted to basically, my question is sort of straightforward. Where are the challenges in those two areas? My second question is, in terms of the offset findings, obviously we've got the reports in front of us. There's one area which needs improvements and which is the Department of Our Looked After Children. So I just wanted to kind of like, it was an interesting read, both from the presentation, officer's presentation, and also, I mean, officer's report and the actual report itself. It says that the senior management team was able to, like, you kind of identified the area of improvements as well. So I wanted to kind of find out or understand more, like, what was the challenges that we kind of like more or less knew some of the issues ahead of the inspection, but obviously being able to diagnose the problem is a great place to be. Yeah, I just wanted to understand the challenges in that area, but also what improvements do we need to make to kind of bring it to a good standards, because yeah.
So just to summarise, if I've got the gist, it's what the challenges are of both the Ofsted inspection and safety valve. So am I right? Is that it? Well, I think we've set out, we've got an action plan, which is in the report around the Ofsted inspection. I'll talk about that first. We got, as you know, one requires improvement. I'm not so sure that, I mean, I am certain that our officers know the service. So I don't think there were any particular surprises in the comments. And I have to say, I think the report was completely even-handed. I think it was very fair. I think they got to the nub, really did see the service over that 3 weeks. And what they've said about in the areas that requires improvement, it is on the one hand, on the other hand, this is good, it's not so good. And the action plan spells out exactly where we're putting our energies. And as you know, that has to be with Ofsted by July 18th. It's already drafted effectively because it's really in the body of this report. So I think we know we have to improve around like life story, consistency, fostering. Those are very, very key areas, and matching and so on. And all of this is hugely detailed. But I know that the team are already involved in doing that. I mean, they leave no stone unturned. We are also moving towards having the Excellence Board, which I think will start in September. I think it would be having its first meeting after the summer break. And that will, of course, hold us to account and be independently chaired. And, of course, give us the challenge that we need. So I think we are absolutely aware of what we need to do in order to get to outstanding, really. You know, areas like, I don't know if you know, but I'm a member of the fostering panel. I've joined the fostering panel, so I'll be having my own insight into some of that and seeing what's going on. In relation to safety valve, the biggest challenge is to deliver all those projects on time and on budget. I mean, it is the most detailed and enormously complicated programme. And it is complicated more by the fact that we've got to deliver as we go along to the children that we've now got in the system, while we want to change the system. But we've got to we have to carry families with us in this journey because of the way we want to change things like the banding system, about when an EHCP kicks in. Obviously, Jackie and Mary are here and they can talk, I should imagine, forever ad nauseam on this particular topic. But they've been working really to reconfigure SEND Because what happens now is in summary, the EHCP is the gatekeeper of the resources. We need to get to a position where it isn't, where for children with needs that can be met more easily and effectively, those resources come because the children need them. And you're not locked into a plan from age 6 to age 25 because the parents will have the confidence that the resources are there or the needs can be met. That is a big, big, huge change. It requires the partnership relationships with parents, but it really means we have to have the resources there that parents can see, that they know they're there. Now, for schools, that's also an important thing because the way it works is just presentation, safety, but currently a school has to fund the first 6,000. And some schools are cracking under the weight of children who have plans, which they have to put £6,000 ahead. So for one form-entry school, you can really, push the budget to the limit. So there are lots and lots of dimensions here. And it impacts on our capital programme. We have to deliver that on time. If we want to support children who are in borough, we have to accommodate them in a properly equipped resource base, call it what you like. I hate the word unit. I hate it, so I'm not going to use. So I've just put that there. So I'm trying to think of another word. As a resource base, a wing, something, which is equipped and where we can fund the staff internally using our funding in a much more localised way. I will tell you, I was at a workshop this afternoon from the Local Government Association for Education, Children's Services Finance, and most of it was about safety valve and the absolute imperative to deliver this, because if we don't, if we're not on course 2026, Armageddon, financial Armageddon is what they were saying. So I hope that's an answer.
Great, thank you very much for that. So I can see 2 hands. Lords, you're first, then Amanda, then anyone else, and Lottie.
Zena, you possibly know maybe what I'm going to ask, but I've got serious concerns about the Haringey safety valve and its delivery, because at this moment in time, you must be aware that the majority of schools on the east of the borough are going through a restructuring process. Now, Amanda and I sit on the same governing body, and on Thursday we're going to be having to look at what do we cut. And my worry is that the answer could very well be the support staff. If we start, making redundant really the majority of our support staff, I don't know how we're going to be able to deliver to our SEND children. And I think it's an issue that needs to be discussed, and it needs to be discussed in a collaborative way by the local authority with governors, because we're in a position that we have to make those decisions. And at the moment, although I must admit we are getting very good support by individual officers, there's been no real collaborative meetings within our planning areas to help governors make these decisions. And we have to start making them, well, Amanda and I, on Thursday night. And then I've got meetings next Wednesday. So next week, I think, really, basically, I think we need to be at least coming together before the end of term. That's one thing. The other thing is that I don't know whether you actually sort of are aware, but there was a meeting in Parliament to discuss the whole issue about falling roles and schools facing financial difficulties. And it was a very good debate in the House. But the thing is that, and I'm going from all of the sort of, parties and the people representing, from Lib Dems, Tories and Labour, basically, again, SEND, the concerns are very much about SEND and the delivery of SEND as we then cope with the financial problems. But the things, and I know you're passionate about not closing schools, but from this debate in Parliament, most other London boroughs are looking at either amalgamating schools or closing them. And I just wonder about your comments about what I've just said.
Lots of questions there. Regarding governors, I was at the governor's briefing the other night, where Mary and Jackie presented about safety valve. I think they did. I mean, I texted them after me to say what brilliant. They did a marvellous job. Absolutely spoke. Were you were there, Tim? Were you? Was somebody there from help? I can't remember. Anyway, they did a great job. But Amanda was there. I think they didn't conceal anything. I think there's a feeling that maybe we're not telling people really what's going on, but I think we are. The paperwork is very clear. It's very detailed. The slides have gone around umpteen times, and I think there are starting to be meetings with governors, and you know that I agree with you about that, and I think our officers agree about that. Bringing the governors along is absolutely critical. And I know an event is being planned for some time after the summer holidays. Whether we can bring anything together before the holidays, I would have to check with the officers, and I can't give you the detail on that. But I think your request is being heard here this evening. But you have a governor structure. I don't know whether your governor groups report to each other. I think there are lots of bits of half knowledge going around, which I don't think is very helpful. And I think some of that happened the other night. And I think it's better that we're all in the same room and we all hear it. So I agree with you on that point. And of course, governors are going to be responsible for the budgets. So you absolutely have to be in the room. Regarding places and everything, other boroughs are already voting to close schools. Camden have closed some schools. Hackney are having discussions, I think, around school closures. I think Lambeth, I can't remember which other authorities, but this is not a problem that is peculiar to Haringey, as we know. But we are at that point. We are working to see how we can support our schools to be more sustainable in different ways, in soft federations or whatever. And I know Jane has been doing a massive amount of work on that, and it might be an issue for discussion at the next meeting. I think it is a really important issue, and I'm very pleased it is now going up the agenda, because both as a councillor, but also when I was a governor rep on the schools forum, I raised school places for years. The writing has been on the wall for years with schools, and it will filter through to secondary very soon. What's happening in primary. So this is a massive issue for our borough. So the more debate we have, the more discussion, the better. Regarding school budgets, I know that Jane is working with schools who are in financial problems around ways that they can manage in the meantime. And for members of the committee may not know that what the council does is give a loan. It loans schools money where they are in deficit, but they do have to pay it back. Don't think we loan the academies. I don't think we do. I don't think we loan the free schools, but we do loan community schools where they're in deficit. And I think the diocesanes, yeah. I don't know if I've answered your question, but
sorry, can I just briefly come in? Can we just keep our questions and answers slightly shorter? I know, because there will be more questions. So I just want to make sure everybody has a chance. And you wanted to come in? Yeah.
Just to follow up on what Councillor Brabazon has said, and just to be completely explicit, if I may, that the question was about safety valve and challenges and the issue of school budgets. There may be overlap with safety valve, but that's predominantly with school place planning that we've discussed here, and schools have been challenged with their funding because the birth rate across the country is falling. I just wanted to make that separation, that I wouldn't want people to think that the reason schools are challenged is only safety valve. There are more than one issue here, and actually the school place planning issue predated our safety valve work. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that, Anne. Sorry, Lord, have you finished all of your questions?
No, it's just
I want
really
to
a
move
comment.
to.
It's just a comment that at the moment, chairs and governors are having to do a lot of research for schools that are going from a 2-form entry to a 1-form. And I've spent a lot of time doing research in terms of what should be the most appropriate, effective model to adopt. Now, in some ways, I shouldn't have to be doing this. I should be being able to go to people and asking for support. I'm even using AI, which has been very helpful, actually. But the thing is, it would be really good if people like me or Amanda can go to people to ask about options in terms of structures and whatever, because we're having to make those decisions before the end of term, rather than sort of, wait until sort of the new academic year.
Thanks, Rose. So there's, even though you said it's a comment, but there's some questions. So Anne wants to come and respond to them.
Lords, thank you very much for your question, and thank you for letting me come in, Chair. Every school with their finances and their pupil place planning and the size of the school are experiencing different challenges. We've been working with cluster groups of head teachers for many years now on this matter, and we've brought ISOS in. So outside, Lords, I'm very happy the decisions are the schools to make, and of course my AD Jane Edwards, I'll ask her to contact you to see what additional supports are needed. These aren't easy decisions, as Councillor Brabazon has said. In many local authorities, and Councillor Brabazon named Camden, who have had to close schools already and are closing more. In Hackney, they're looking at closing schools. We're working hard not to do that, but I'll ask Jane to contact you outside of this meeting. But these are decisions that the chair of governors are leading on for their schools with our support. I'll stop there.
Thank you for that response. Amanda, it's your turn now.
Thank you. Directed at Zena, really, Councillor Brabazon. You made a statement about the safety valve, and I sit on that steering group, so I'm very aware of what's going on. When you summarize it the way you did, you create panic. You need to clarify how the local authority are planning to have more speech and language. It isn't always a given that parents and carers require an EHC for speech and language. Often there, if not always, there are other support needs. So in terms of the safety valve and the need to reduce the EHCs, if you're speaking about it in terms of speech and language, then it would be really prudent to make that clear to parents and carers and probably, governors and others that don't really know, because this is where the kind of the panic or the misinformation can stem from. Do you understand what I mean?
I certainly do, and I wasn't trying to give you any false information. I was trying, if I didn't express it clearly, forgive me. What I'm trying to say is what we need is we need to be sure that our system can provide the speech and language therapy at the earliest stage, interventions and so on, to avoid the need to feel that you have to have that plan in order to get the provision. The provision needs to be there, and in some authorities it is. And that goes back to what I was saying about why it's so important. It's so good Tim is here, because we have to work with health, who are the main providers of speech and language therapy. It comes through these complicated health arrangements. And I'm not on top of all that operational detail. That's why we have all these very, very experienced officers who do it 35 hours a week to do all that. And they are working to reconfigure that so that we don't, certainly with children who do not yet have EHCPs, so that they can get the provision and we can provide it and the parent doesn't feel they have to go into battle. That's really where we have to be.
That I completely understand, Zena, and all I'm saying is that provided it is only speech and language that parents are trying to acquire EHCs, then your statement stands. But in quite a few cases, and I'm going to put my neck out and say at least 85% of the EHCs that are issued, there are other support needs, which is why the EHC is required and not just speech and language. Having said that, for the families that only acquire it for speech and language, those EHCs will be much easier, I suppose, in your plan around the safety valve to give them extra support by way of health and you know, through health by speech and language places. You don't like the word unit, so I'm not going to use the word. But what about those who have more than just speech and language? That's really the point I'm making. It isn't a given that it's EHCs are just about speech and language, because believe me, as a parent myself, that's really not the case. That may be part of, but isn't always the main driver for EHCs.
Amanda, you're pushing another open door. We all agree, and we know that, and that's why I don't think there is any really disagreement with you or Sempower on that. Is how we get there and how we do it. And we've got the report, the update on safety valve later in the agenda, and I think probably the officers can address that in much more detail than I possibly could. I'm giving my political overview of where our direction of travel is, but
Right.
I'm not the operational manager implementing all of this, but I would know that this is what this team here are doing. Whether you want a response now, when we get to Jackie's report.
Sorry,
I think that'd
Amanda,
be
I
better.
completely,
Can we just-
I completely understand that. All I'm saying is that the way that you presented what you did, Zena, it didn't sound like that. And that's what I was asking you to just be mindful to have clarity about when you speak about it. That's all.
Okay, Amanda, sorry. Yes, that I was just going to say, like, if you want to come back after you ask your question, when you come back, you just need to come back through the chair and also let Councillor Brabazon respond. I think she has responded. And yes, we have a whole item on the agenda on updates about this impact of safety valve and children with disability. So we will have plenty of opportunity to discuss and scrutinize that area. So I'm going to move to Councillor Collett.
Thank you. Zena, last summer, you ran the most extraordinary summer activities. I was just wondering whether we are looking at a similar set of activities this summer.
On my list to ask for a briefing on the summer programme, we have backslid, but I've every confidence that and Andrea Keeble and what's her name, the young woman doing?
It's changed.
There's a young officer who's doing half, that they're absolutely on the case. So I need them to give us a briefing, but I have every confidence. School breaks up the 21st of July, so we need to make sure the programme is out by the 14th latest. So it's been on my mind to chase them up. I have to say, this heat has done me in. Just can't bear it.
Given that we have one of our major summer pools closed and it doesn't look like it, well, possibly may not open for the summer holidays, and we ran a very successful £1 swim last summer, what alternative provision for sporting activity are we providing to replace that lack of pool?
Have to get back to you on what the programme is, and as I said, I'm sure there is a programme, and probably knows that because Children's Services fund it, but I can't give all the detail. But if you want, I will get there and get back to you and members of the committee.
Councillor Collette, thank you for your question. I have to say that we're not going to be in a position to replace all the swims that we have provided year on year on year, because that would be just a false reassurance. However, we do know that where there are swims available in other parts of the borough, that we will endeavour to continue with those. We know that one of our other places, it's a little bit, they have been challenged, but it would be wrong of me to say to you that we've been able to replace the loss of the Tottenham swimming pool. However, the package that we do provide, as you say, is rich and full of interesting activities for children, and a very large number of them are free. So we'll monitor to see what we can do going forward. But this is an issue that I know that my corporate directors are working on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions to Councillor Brabazon? Yeah, Councillor Jameson.
So we've looked at sporting activities through this committee, and I was wondering if we could have, I mean, we have sort of talked about this, an audit of the sports provisions that we've got, and a live page telling people what's available, for various age groups and different sports and different areas, etc., etc. So there's that sort of information as a live thing going on.
See why we can't try and get that sorted. The HAF is updated. I know last year it was sort of updated. It went along which schools, where, when, and the summer programme is on the council's website. And if the summer programme is the same as last year, every child will get a booklet in their hands through school, and it'll be in the usual venues like libraries and all that. But I think you want like a live update.
An electronic version.
I'll see what we can do. I don't run IT.
It's the way though.
Don't rerun anything.
So definitely last year our summer programme was on the system, and when families click on it, it was available. So I'm not entirely sure what
I didn't mean sorry, I didn't mean just the summer programme. I meant sports activities that run all through the year, after school things, teams, all that sort of stuff. If we have a live something, a piece of information, way of having piece of information, things can be added and taken away as we go along.
Okay.
So that we all know, anyone can find out what's available for their child at any age, in any area.
And
If
Rob
I may.
wants to also come in. Sorry, and Rob wants to come.
I was going to say that last Tuesday, the panel received a presentation from Barnet about how they promoted sporting activity, including the summer programme and the communication plan around that. And they did a presentation, which I'm trying to get hold of. When I've got that, I'm quite happy to, I can share it with you. And perhaps there's a few things that ideas we can borrow from them.
Anything we can pinch from Barnet, which is good, we should do it.
Yeah, so we can do summer programmes that we're in control of, but actually outside of that, schools put on their own activities, and we're not resourced to do that. However, that is a good idea. We can put on the list of things to consider when we are resourced to do it and have got the facilities to do it well. The worst thing about doing these things is you miss somebody over there, or it's not taken off or put on time, and then it's, it doesn't work well. But certainly the summer programme that we have control over, we can manage. We know what's coming on and we can take it off when it's not there. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions to Councillor Brabazon? No. Yvonne, sorry.
Just to let Anne and Zena know, I went to a meeting last week and we were told, it was a council meeting, and we were told that Park Road, they are working on it, but they can't guarantee that they will get it working. But on what's it called? The Tottenham pool down there, that won't even be ready, not even for August, because they just can't get the parts that they want. So, but there are free tickets available. They're being sent out to different organisations, but it means those particular 2 pools, they won't be open. They're almost certain they won't be, because they haven't got the parts for them.
Thank you for sharing that, Yvonne. So there is a possibility that none of the Haringey pools might be open. Yeah, okay. Any other comments on that? And okay, just yes, I mean, that might be a possibility, but there would be certainly other activities for children and young people in the parks and other areas. Okay, so no further question. I'm going to close this item. Thank you very much, Councillor Brotherson, for answering our questions. You're free to go, but you're also free to stay, so it's up to you. Thank you very much. Item 10 is the the recent offset inspection of local authority children's social care. For this item, I've got the Director of Children's Services, Anne Graham, and the Assistant Director, Beverly Hendrick. They will be presenting a 10 minutes presentation on the findings of the offset. Then we will have opportunity to ask questions and make comments and contributions. Anne and Beverly, I don't know who.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to hand over to Bev, who will take us through this report. Thank you, Bev.
The last time I was with you, we talked about a number of things, including the lack sufficiency strategy and some of our vision and ambitions and priority targets for this year. Some of that is captured in the minutes. As part of that discussion, we talked about some of our preparations for what we expected was the full ILAC inspection. We had the conversation here and the phone call came. And we moved into delivery mode after preparing for an Ofsted inspection during COVID, post-COVID, and it started this year. The inspectors called and the Director of Children's Services received the call and all that preparation work just kicked in. The staff were briefed. There was no anxieties. Many staff contacted Anne, myself and the other senior leaders to say they were looking forward to talking to Ofsted after so very long. And we took that as a really good indication that the culture in Haringey had changed. When Anne arrived and I arrived in 2019, the staff did not want to talk to any senior leaders. They'd lost confidence. They didn't feel that they were heard or understood, and the pressures that they were dealing with. And it's important for the minutes that this is recorded, pressures that they were dealing with were not heard wider across the Haringey system. And so changing the culture, supporting the practitioners was a critical success factor. And retaining our staff helped to provide stability so that the practice that we wanted to deliver on and the experiences of our children and families would improve. You can't improve that if every week you have massive losses. And so the Ofsted made the call and they spent 3 weeks with us. So it certainly felt like 3 months with us. And they first of all commended to us, and you'll see this in the ILAC report, the advances in our early help services. So previous inspection reports described early help as underdeveloped, and it was with great pride for our families and our children to read some of the feedback that they had willingly gave the early help team to share with Ofsted around their opinion about what has changed. The structures, the systems, the attitude of the workers, the going the extra mile made them feel as if they, like the workers, had been heard and listened to, and that their issues were important to the officers they had interaction with. And so Ofsted said, well done. Early help is now in a really strong place, and you'll see the exact word in the letter that's attached to the reports that we've submitted for you to consider today. The second area that they looked at in great detail was the MASH, EDT, the emergency duty team, and the front door, the assessment service. They found no children unsafe, and they commended the advancements in the practice approach, policies, procedures, and the quality of the social work practice at the front door. They felt that we had a growth mindset and a growth model around the emergency duty team, and they commended the plans to move from an emergency duty service to an out of hours service. And it's still an ambition and a vision that we hold. We hope to see that in place by the summer of next year. In the assessment team, they really quizzed the length of time our families were worked with, and they didn't see it as a deficit. They understood that some of the practice that we developed over COVID, and that was not closing cases because so many other agencies were closed, was something we continued to do until the time was right. We are, of course, keen to see a remodification of that approach now that the easy measures are in full effect, and we are now living with COVID as an everyday matter. The children in care team, we told Ofsted what we felt was areas for improvement. Our self-evaluation reflected that, and when they found no looked after child was unsafe, that many looked after children had been placed with the same carers for many years. It was the resources, the commissioning structure to move us on to children being matched with therapeutic life story work as a service to be commissioned in place, and permanency planning being an approach that happens before children became looked after, and our plans to have a baseline assessment that says if a child needed, that we understood a child's needs in terms of ages and stages of development, and we could also measure analytically the parenting capability to meet that need over time, over the maturity of the child. So they saw the vision and the work that we were doing to impact on, to deliver that vision and how that would impact children in care. I think that further work, Councillor Makbule, you asked what's the challenges for children in care. The challenge is to move away from a model where we export children in care out of Haringey, away from our schools, away from CAMS, away from their GPs, away from a community where members look like them. And we start to build our insourcing strategy so that we have our own children's home, our own mother and baby units, our own wings units, so that we cease the exporting and contribute to some of the efforts that Jane Andrews is making, our new AD for education, to ensure that looked after children through the virtual school have the best of our 99% schools, outstanding and good. We do not want to have them placed very far away from Haringey. They are our family and we want them close. That's our hugest challenge in a volatile placement market. And many of you would have read all sorts of articles in newspapers where the challenges have been raised with both the Department of Health and the DfE around stable homes built in love strategy that the Secretary of State is rolling out, and asking all to reimagine what the life will look like for children who are looked after if we reimagine and rebuilt the system. That's a 5 to 10 year plan, but we need to, many of our looked after children will be adults, so we need some impact now for them. And so through our capital budgets and our new commissioning strategy, you know that we've opened Hazelmere, we've finished the recruitment in full, and I am pleased to say that we already have the first set of 6 children that will be supported through Hazelmere. There's already 2 in the unit, and we are working with another local authority to bring their resources. So we move the model from a deficit model that pays out, but we draw income into Haringey. We will continue our discussions with our colleagues from the ICB around the step down to tier 4, because that is the biggest pressure. Children who have mental health difficulties has increased by at least 70% in our referrals. And it's on the spectrum, the wide range of social, emotional, mental health needs, as well as diagnosable mental health difficulties. We can't keep arguing with our colleagues in the ICB around thresholds for tier 4. We have to think solution. And so Anna's signed off our ability to use some of our capital spend to start to do some joint and detailed work to have a step down provision for tier 4. The other areas, as you may know, that Ofsted changed the ILAC framework and they added care leavers to that framework. And I am delighted to tell you that our care leaver service attracted a good in Ofsted's estimation. The reading of the report is really heartening. We heard lots of stories from the Ofsted inspectors and from the staff themselves, and indeed care leavers, who were really clear that for some of them, this is the closest they've come to meaningful relationships in their episode of being looked after in Haringey. DCT was commended. There were any tricky cases in the disabled children's team. For some of you around this table, you'll know what that means for us and the journey that we've come through. And I commend my heads of services who may hear about this, but are not here to hear the work that they've had to do to turn the service around. And we continue to work with our colleagues from health to move closer to an integrated model of serving children with disabilities. The Ofsted action plan, post Ofsted action plan from page 69 to 81 is 12 pages of our recommendations to you as a scrutiny panel to go through in detail. Now, you may not have had an opportunity to look at the detail of that's been submitted, but it is really important to officers like me that I hear your views. Have we got it right? Some of you have been around for a very, very long time, and so you will know history beyond my tenure here. And I am encouraging your feedback through Councillor Brabazon before we have to submit the post Ofsted action plan on the 18th of July. Now, that isn't an invitation for you to send your comments back on the 18th of July. I need them at least a week before to run them through all sorts of governance process, including the DCS signing them off. But I really do need your feedback on that post Ofsted action plan. I'm happy to take any questions tonight.
Right, thank you very much for that, Beverly. Not so much a question. I've got a couple of clarifications, seeking clarification. One of them is like independent reviewing officer.
Yes.
So who is the independent reviewing officer, or what's their role? Why are they like a challenge? It's for us to kind of understand better. And secondly, what does life story work means? Is it like a therapeutic service or some kind? Okay, I'll let you explain, the expert. Thank you.
Not a problem at all. Independent reviewing officers were birthed out of a serious case or a national case review many years ago, before I qualified, I think. And their role is to provide independent scrutiny and challenge to the looked after system around the experiences of children who are in our care. They are treated as independent, although they're engaged contractually by the local authority, and they're managed through an independent arm of the safeguarding service, so that there is no contamination of their objectivity. We have in Haringey 7 independent reviewing officers. Many of them have been around for many, many years. They were team managers here before and graduated up. And our caseload on average, and CPAC will hear more of the detail, are around 60 children that they're responsible for. They do visits. They hold lack reviews. They talk to the children. They meet with the parents, even though we've got full care orders. Their responsibility is to talk with all of the professionals and to challenge the system. So when there was a period where the dental take-up during COVID was poor for our children in care, it was our IROs who waged war. Placement stability. They will often raise concerns around commissioning structures and indeed challenge myself on placement insufficiency. More recently, since we launched our lack sufficiency, I've not had any challenges for them because they can see that we're working very hard to develop and implement that. So the IRO roles are critical. Josh McAllister's suggestion was to reconstruct the use of that experienced resource so that they could go into a different part of the safeguarding service. And I think the whole of the practice leaders across the country wrote really strong words around this is not the time to do that. But it hasn't been removed from those recommendations. It may well resurrect itself in year 3 under pillar 4 in time to come. So that's the IROs. The life story work. The way that I explain it is when I was a young mum, I kept a diary of all the lovely things my child did. You know, the first time they yawned, clenched their fist, snuggled into my neck. I kept a record of their weight. And I wrote endearing, warm, lovely things about them in their little book. And when they were 18, I gave it to them just to tell them and remind them of where they came from when they thought they got too big for their boots. And therapeutic life story work is what a good parent would do. A child's sense of belonging, particularly when they're separated from their family, is key. And we have clinicians, and I mean psychologists in our service, that support social workers to hold the child in mind and to see the therapeutic value for children who have suffered trauma, separation, loss. It's important that that work is done because we have to see not the baby, but the 30-year-old who's trying to make sense of a lonely world.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Collett and Councillor Abella.
Thank you, Beverly. I'm so proud of the work that you guys have done. It's absolutely extraordinary. I think one of the things I really do want to comment on is the retention of your social workers, which has just had a 360, really, hasn't it? So very well done to you all. I just wanted to ask you to expand a little bit on the therapeutic life story. You beautifully described how you would, write these things down. Also, as parents, we repeat family stories.
Yes.
Often, photographs come out and we talk about that event. How are those exercises dealt with for children in care as part of their therapeutic story? How many repetitions are there? How frequently does the child visit the book?
So we have 2 processes, the life storybook, and it may be constructed therapeutically, dependent on the needs of the child. And then we have what's called the home book. So the home book is more like the diary that the foster carer typically will keep for the child. And in that home book, a bit like, the birth charts, that the book that somebody gives you as a present when you have a baby. This is a picture of you when you were born. Here's your identification brace. This is you at 1, 2, 3, 4, first Christmas, first party, first day at school. Those are built into our standards with IFA, our independent fostering agencies, and foster carers. That's not the area of challenge. The area of challenge is when children lack stability and they move from placement to placement, and those placements can be residential. The provider's contract dictates that they should do that, but compliance was the issue. And so Caroline Bryan is our AD for commissioning, because as you know, commissioning sat up in somewhere else in the council and negotiated for it to come into children's services. And as a result of that, we've reissued contracts. And in those contracts last year, it says, these are our practice standards and this is what we expect you to do. What I am seeing more and more when I do ADM reviews, that's the agency decision making review of cases, I am seeing more compliance. So our providers where children are likely to be placed with them for more than a year do take those pictures, do organise events and start to put that in their books. So in the home story book, that's where that gets covered, and that's expected, and the IROs are expected to check that that's happening. And if they come back and say, well, it's happening, but the pictures were dark, the quality is poor, that's something that they would address with the team managers. And the life story book is something that we've mandated as necessary, particularly when children are moving on to be matched and permanently placed in their homes, their foster care homes. Some of the challenges has been when children come later into care, parents can be very distressed. And it may take years for them to come round to releasing some of those early years information, because it's difficult to deal with the separation. And I think that was an area that we picked up during the inspection, that perhaps there was more work we needed to do to work with the birth parents to secure that type of information when children were late into care. Now we have commissioning and we've got a structure for that to reach out to parents. I think that we'll start to jump that hurdle.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bella.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to join Lottie in congratulating you, your colleague Zina Ann, for this well-deserved result. It's really fantastic. In the pack we received ahead of this meeting, we received your post-Ofsted action plan. And what I'm interested to know is, what is after getting this good result, what is your level of ambition moving forward? Is it to move experiences and progress of children in care to good? Is it to maintain the overall good assessment? Are you aspiring to outstanding? And if you are, do you feel you have the resources to do that?
Such a helpful question. And I'm going to make sure that Anne gets called into this as well. I'm a parent. As a parent, I want the very best for my child. That doesn't change because I'm an employee of the council. The aspiration is to set up an excellence board so that the very best we can provide with your support to Haringey children is what we should be providing. Now, I know that's caveated by all sorts of resources and challenges, and we know that this is not an easy job, but I think that Anne and I are really well supported by a team of very, very committed head of services and stability in our service managers and team managers who all share that ambition and vision. So no, we don't want good. Good is great. It is, and it's a good news story for Haringey, but that's not where the ambition and aspiration for children should sit. We aim for excellence, we'll settle for outstanding.
It's a question you can see that we're clamoring to get to the mic to, you know, which of us, we're looking at each other, all of us along this row, and we know that you in this room share that we want the very, very best for our children and young people, and it is my life's work. It is our life's work. This isn't like, I don't want to denigrate anyone who builds cars. That is an important job, but it's not like constructing a car, is it? The challenge of life story work, when we don't have, you were born on this day and these are the, we don't have all that rich work. And, you can't replace those stories so easily unless you have stability in your placement. So somebody can say, oh yeah, you got that little mark when you fell off the wall because you were jumping with excitement. We don't know all of those little stories, so but we strive to, yes.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Jameson?
I mean, I just love the way you talk about the children, because you talk about them like you really understand them as human beings, which I think is why you've done so well and will do well in the future. What I want to know is about siblings. So if you've got and when they reach a certain age, what happens to children when they, they've got a placement till 18, but then they're placed with their sibling, but then when their sibling reaches 18 first, what happens to them then?
So the principle of our policy around, we call it together or apart, is that we lean and we're weighted towards together. So if there are 3 siblings, varying ages, and one's hitting 18, we would, and they're with a foster placement, we would want to have negotiations from the age of 16 and a half to 17 years old around them staying put, and them staying with their with the same foster carer, so that they can stay up to 21 and beyond with agreement. When we place children, we hold that in mind. We're looking for the stability for them being with the same carers, and we've tried to ensure that the sibling group, your relationship with your brothers, your sisters, and your siblings, is the most enduring relationships we can all have. Should be. And so what we try to do is ensure that we respect that and keep the siblings together. They may have lost mum and dad, auntie and uncle, the country they were born in, but if they come with their siblings, we do our best to keep them. Now, sometimes that is extremely difficult, and it is heart-wrenching when we have to do the together and apart and make a decision that for big a set of factors mean that they cannot live in the same household together. And we then try to maintain frequent quality contact with them. Last week, I had the pleasure of signing off a holiday trip for 2 siblings who had to be apart, but they were going on holiday together with both foster carers. It's just the sort of thing that we need, but sometimes risk means we can't keep them together.
And
It is incredibly challenging work, but though that holiday will be part of the home book and the making of memories that keeps the siblings together through life. There's too many stories across the world of siblings who've been separated, and when they do come together, they have nothing to talk about. But I wanted to make the point that because our children looked after, we are their corporate parents, and it was really great that it was in 1998 that Frank Dobson introduced the concept, 12th of September, of corporate parenting. Why do I remember that? Because all that work landed on my desk. 12th of September 1998, Frank Dobson. With the Quality Protects initiative, but he challenged councils and councillors to say, where are your children in care? They were looked after children then, and we didn't know the number of them. We didn't know where they were. So we've come a long way to take responsibility for them, to be accountable for their outcomes and so on. So when all that leads up to, there is a separate member committee called the Corporate Parenting Advisory Group that focuses on children in care. And in the work that Bev's been doing, with support from the DfE National Lead, we've reconstructed that board so that there's greater involvement of members, and our lead member, Councillor Brabazon, chairs it. So we're continuing to make improvement as we go.
great, thank you very much for that. I don't see any more hands. So I'm gonna just basically, thank you so much, Beverly, for that brilliant presentation. I just wanted to say, I think it will be really, really good going forward within the life of this panel, within a year. It will be really good to have an update on the implementation of the actions like the offset action plans, and to give members an opportunity to kind of feedback and to also comment on it. So that will be really useful. But obviously we need to give you a bit of time to kind of set up those additional resources that will help you to achieve a good standards. But yeah, thank you very much for that.
So Matt Blue, you may recall that in 2019, when we could meet more freely, that there were some directions that you would have an update on the post-offset plan once a year after the original presentation. I think that model appeared to work well for us. COVID got in the way, but this is an opportunity for us to do that again. So Rob, I'll work with Rob around setting the dates.
Thank you very much for that. Now we move to item 11, SEND early intervention, and Jackie DeFalco will be presenting. Jackie is the Assistant Director of Early Health Prevention and SEND Provision. So following Jackie's presentation, we will have plenty of opportunity to ask questions as well. Thank you, Jackie. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. It's a joint team effort between myself and my colleague, Tim Miller. So he's going to start the presentation. So I'll let him introduce himself and then he'll hand over to me.
Sorry, really sorry, Tim. I didn't mean to ignore you. It's just okay.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Thank you, Chair. And that's a rather hard act to follow. Just to say a few sort of comments to put this presentation into context, because I'm sure you'll have had opportunities to read them in your pack, is that the journey of transformation and the level of ambition is also significant in SEND, and we're very proud of the work that Haringey's partnership has achieved over the last couple of years to get to where we are, and equally ambitious about where we go from here going forward. So I'm going to present a couple of slides about the written statement of action. Just to again put that in context for panel, the content of this is in our SEND strategy as well. So it's really important for panel to understand that the borough has a SEND strategy which sets out a multi-year plan of delivery, and the written statement of action in response to the SEND Ofsted inspection in 21 is our statement of action to address the gaps identified through that inspection, in which we are very closely scrutinised both within the partnership and by the Department for Education and NHS England London region for our delivery on. So should we go on to the slides, and I'll draw out some of the items in there that I think speak most strongly to early intervention and prevention for panel. Much of this plan is in that strategy and under the section about identifying needs and intervening early to support children and young people. So particular, sorry, slides haven't been following, but a couple of the key things that are in the written statement of action plan and really talk to our desire to be able to identify needs early and support children and families in a timely way is around completing the statutory assessments on time, improving our rate of annual reviews, and where children need a clinical diagnosis to be able to reduce the waiting times the families have been having to wait for that. So the pack contains some of the information about the progress that's been made with those. I'd highlight a couple of things, particularly on this slide as well, on co-production. It's a very successful Voices Day, which you may have heard about already, where we brought young people, children, parents, carers, other colleagues together to learn to listen to the voices of our young people and to feed into the SEND partnerships plans as we go forwards. And also just to make members aware of the work that Markfield and Open Door have now been commissioned to do, because some of our early conversations with parent carers around their experiences of waiting for an autism diagnosis, because we know that's the diagnoses, the waits are far longer than we would like, in common with the rest of London and the country, unfortunately. but that more support whilst people were waiting and after a diagnosis as well is really critical. People didn't want to wait for 18 months with no support and no information when they could be supported through that period, because the diagnosis is just that, and it's what you do with it that's much more important. So really pleased that they've been included now. There are still challenges. So the work around improving the quality of health advice to the council SEND team is ongoing. I'm really pleased that we've been able to make some progress now with our main CAMS provider, who is now being supported by colleagues from the ICB, from Whittington Health and the council, working together to put in place really good processes and practice around SEND, so that they can support the SEND team and the children and young people that use their services more effectively and in a more timely way in future. So I'll pick it up here rather than on the KPIs. So we've had a lot of investment from the ICB into our autism diagnostic pathway to increase the capacity for both face-to-face assessments and introduce online assessment processes, which are more convenient for some families and preferred by some. It's not compulsory, it's just an option for some where it's clinically appropriate. We have seen some significant reductions in waiting times across groups, but it's still a challenging set of targets to reach because of the rise in demand that we've seen through the period that we've been implementing this plan. So some more detailed numbers in front of you on the progress we've made around those areas. And again, I particularly draw your attention to the completion of EHCPs within 20 weeks, which is a really key part of being able to provide good, timely assessments of children and young people, but also how important it is that the young people's voices are reflected in those plans. It's not just a conveyor belt to get a plan in place, it's got to be meaningful. And it's really great to see a high level of performance against the inclusion of young people's voices in that, and I think reflects the co-production that we've been doing with SEND Power through the SEND Executive and the other working groups. The last slide here is on the autism diagnoses performance. So we met the targets that we set ourselves for April 2022 in terms of reduction in targets, reduction in waiting times. The last data you have here was for February against our April targets, with a shortfall against our targets, still progress. But as I said, demand has risen significantly, and it's been challenging to meet the level of ambition we set ourselves so far. Finally, our work, as I said, talked before about our work on co-production, work with SEND Power and families and children and young people working together around the SEND system. And these are some of the measures, both around improving the communications to families, and particularly the SEND newsletter and the local offer uptake, which have been really important parts of our work to improve both the level and quality of information that parent carers have in general about the SEND system and about what's happening through the year has really improved. Thank you. I'll hand over to Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. Are there any questions on that part before we move on to the safety valve?
Yeah. Lottie.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting to see the length of time we have for autism assessments. We're looking at 12 months for 0 to 11-year-olds. But crucially, I think, we're looking at 18 months for 12 to 18-year-olds.
Now, obviously, well, in my experience as the mother of a child that was diagnosed at 14 years of age, we're actually dealing with a crisis at this point. Whilst our primary schools are often soft, warm and cuddly places, secondary schools are frequently not for a child with autism, particularly females with autism, who do not, in most cases, actually sort of appear to their teachers as autistic. And I think this can lead to serious issues. What are we going to do to actually reduce that figure? I mean, I would say it's a safer place to wait 0 to 11 than it is 12 to 18. I think that's a very dangerous place for us to be waiting for autism diagnosis. It's fantastic that you've got the post-diagnosis support in there. I would say that that is absolutely vital, particularly with older children. My daughter was diagnosed at the Tavistock. She had 8 weeks of therapeutic understanding of herself. And in fact, that was given an additional 8 weeks after that. I'm a pushy parent. There was also parental support that was quite extensive, and extraordinarily sibling support that went on for a number of years with the Sibling Youth Club. How are we, with a package of 130k, which is not a lot of money, going to be providing things like that that actually solve the crisis?
Thank you, and thank you for sharing your own story. I spoke before about Open Door as part of the investments that's been made. Just to be clear, so we worked with the language and support team who provide a lot of support to schools in working with autistic children, who were very clear that their view was that the gap was therapeutic support for children in secondary schools. And so that was why Open Door had been funded for this work, and they were asked, and really in working with them around the design of it with Markfield, we moved away from it being post-diagnostic to being pre and post-diagnostic, and not necessarily immediately post-diagnostic, but actually any time within, I can't remember what we said, 3 years, I think we settled on after diagnosis, because people aren't necessarily ready for that kind of therapeutic support immediately post-diagnostic. Sometimes it's later, sometimes it's pre-diagnostic. So that is in addition to the Tavistock offer, which hasn't changed, and whilst 130 is not a lot, it's considerably more than they were getting before. So it is a significant enhancement in their capacity and capability. We are also working with the other boroughs around North Central London to define a new clinical pathway for autism diagnoses that reflects the different landscape in each borough and the different populations in each borough, but works to some common principles, which is very much about trying to bring forward more support, both therapeutic and practical, for families and the children themselves pre-diagnostically, so that we can support needs and people as they present, rather than waiting to see 12 or 18 months later if they are diagnosed. So we've got a meeting with NHS England this week to talk about our plans this year to bring down waiting lists. So though the target was for April 23, our ambition continues to be to drive down the waits, but we do very much want to support children and families throughout that journey, from early identification through to diagnosis and beyond.
I can see Lords, your hands is up. Is that a legacy or a new hand?
It's a new hand. It's just
great. Okay, please do ask your question.
It's a point of clarification, really. When we did a SEND review, when this panel did a SEND review some time ago, the issue of privately funded assessments was raised. And I can't remember whether we agreed to accept such assessments within the borough or not. I'm aware, because of one of my grandchildren, that Islington will accept, a privately funded assessment, but I think that's got issues for us in the borough, particularly for people who cannot afford such assessment, and how this may sort of very well impact upon the delivery of services. But could you possibly say whether we accept or whether we don't privately funded assessments?
Okay.
I can comment, yes, and I think it's important to add a little bit of nuance to this, both in terms of who we're talking about and what accepting means, and about private therapists. So the NHS, as far as I'm aware, the council doesn't ask a child the employment status of the doctor or therapist that diagnosed them. So certainly from an NHS point of view, people do get private diagnoses all the time. The NHS uses some private diagnostic providers as part of our treatment mix, and people have a right of choice to choose some private providers who might also be commissioned by the NHS services. So some of the growth we've seen in online assessments has been through that national right that we all have to make choices over who provides our healthcare. With that said, GPs are very sensitive about the suitability of some diagnostic providers, as are other clinical teams, including sort of some of our specialist mental health teams or disability teams. And what we encourage parents to do who are considering private arrangements for diagnostic assessments is to talk it through with their general practitioner in the first instance, so that they understand some of the issues that might arise. In my experience over the last couple of years, it's not really been around autism diagnoses that's been difficult, but ADHD diagnoses where medication may have been prescribed and titrated by a private practice, which is not easy medication for a GP to take on prescribing responsibility for. If people have had a private diagnosis, they're not supported by our local specialist ADHD clinical team. So people can get a little bit stuck. So it can be made to work, but we do encourage, and I would encourage you to encourage others if you're having conversations with people about this, to talk to their GP.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lords, for raising an important question. I'm kind of like a bit confused here. Are you suggesting that some families, for example, they could have the assessment privately, then they will approach children's services or schools and just say, this is the diagnosis of my children, could they have the service they need? So everybody has to come through the same process in order to be allocated the right educational plan and so on. Okay, Lords, sorry, Rob wants to come in.
I remember that review. The recommendation was slightly different to that. What it said was that in the event of an assessment by an educational psychologist not being undertaken within the time limit for an AHC plan, any independent assessment by a duly qualified educational psychologist commissioned directly by schools be accepted by the council and schools reimbursed for the costs. So it's a slightly different issue.
Yes, I was talking about education psychology assessments. No, and particularly for autism. But that, Rob, is what I was referring to. Thank you for clarity.
No, I think it's two different things that we're speaking of. You know, and the EHCP process still applies as to, you know, as Tim has said. And it isn't that people, councillor, is as you've said, that people can get a diagnosis and ask for a service on that basis. There is still a process to go through. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the clarity. So no more question. Jackie, we can move to your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So just as a reminder, members, that what we have here is the Safety Valve programme, which is 18 projects, and all of those are underpinned by our SEND strategy. So it's part of our SEND transformation journey. What the programme has done is really expedited the progress and the focus on this. So these are pieces of work that we would have been doing anyway. But I am just going to give a high level update because I am conscious that we've had a number of reports come to previous scrutiny meetings, but also we had a full member session a few weeks ago, which some of you in the room were at that session, but I'm really happy to have a follow-up session if that's needed. So in terms of a reminder of the context, if we continue to do nothing, what this slide shows you is that we are predicted to have an increase in deficit position each year till the end of 27-28, where we would reach £78 million if we do nothing. And that is based on increased demand, a 10% increase in the demand for education healthcare plans, also aligned with the complexity of those increasing, and an increase, and that would take us from 2,567 plans in 2022 to just over 3,600 by 27-28. And I can tell you that we're currently at about 2,800 plans with a projected increase of about 8.2%. But this is the encouraging slide that if we deliver these projects successfully, we will be in a favourable position by the end of 27-28. So I will just talk you through this slide using the 22-23 column because I think it helps just to set the scene. So at the end of 22-23, column F, row F shows us that we had an accumulated deficit of almost £22 million. That has grown since 2016 at a rate of about between £3 and £5 million a year. So we've been spending more than the financial envelope allows, responding to demand. Row F would show you what we think we would save as a result of the 18 projects. Now, as you can see in 22-23, there's a zero figure against that, and that's because we didn't start the programme officially till March this year, although we've been preparing for this for a long time, since the summer last year. Row H shows you the funding that we received from the DfE, which was based on the strength and the confidence of our proposals. So we received an upfront payment of £12 million, which has almost wiped out half of our deficit. And that's a really good position to be in. And then row I shows you what we thought the increased spend would be that year as a result of responding to demand. So in total all of those up, we're ending 22-23 with a reduced deficit position of £11.9 million. And that's what we're starting 23-24 with. And I'm really pleased to report that in terms of our 22-23 target, although we only started in March, we exceeded our target by £500,000. And a lot of that is not necessarily down to implementing the projects because we're only just starting to do that, but it was about tightening up our governance processes, our decision-making processes, reducing duplication and making sure that we're not double funding children. So that's a lot of the work that's got us to that position. So this slide is just to give you assurance, the next two slides about the work that we're doing to engage with stakeholders. I cannot tell you the audiences that we are going out to on a very regular basis. So this presentation is a format that we take out to a whole range of audiences. So you can see that from, we're very well engaged with our Parent Carers Forum. We have a brilliant relationship with them working together. And Amanda Bernard, who's in the meeting, is the chair of the Parent Care Forum and is also a member of the Safety Valve Steering Group. Mary also attends various meetings so that we can talk to wider steering group members, not just about providing progress updates, but also being very clear about how we're engaging stakeholders, particularly parents and carers in this programme, because we recognise the anxiety that this programme will bring. So it's very important that we make sure we provide full and accurate information. I won't go through these, but you can see the different examples of stakeholders that we're engaging with. So we both go to various head teacher forum meetings where we're talking to heads and engaging them in this work. We have been to a governor's briefing a few times. The most recent one was last week. We provide an update at every schools forum meeting as the formal decision-making process is supporting this work to make sure we've got that robust scrutiny, because schools are our key partners in this programme, because it's about systemic change, not just about the local authority driving this programme. We provide a progress report at every SEND executive, and I'm really pleased to report that now members of the SEND executive has shared ownership in this programme, and they are then taking this highlight report and sharing it within their networks. And I saw evidence of that recently where the one of the head teachers who attends the SEND executive for primary schools co-delivered a presentation with Mary on this programme. Equally, Whittington have given me evidence to show how they've shared this work as well. We had the recent members briefing and we'll continue to do that on request. And obviously we bring regular progress reports on request to Children's Scrutiny. Other areas is in terms of overview and scrutiny as part of the finance report that goes there, we talk about the impact of the Safety Valve programme to make sure that's covered there. And then the most important thing I think to share with you, and I will click and hope this works, is we have a dedicated web page. It
might just be a second. You have to.
So I don't think it's coming up, but I'll just take us back to. Okay.
Members, if you click in your presentation, it will take you to the council's website. So it's on Jackie's screen, but it hasn't transposed onto this screen.
Okay. So I've just taken us back to the presentation. So just wait and give it a minute to come back up. Geez, let me just try and do this again. There we go. So if you click on those slides, on any links in the presentation, it will take you to more detailed information. So we have a dedicated web page on our local offer, and within there you will see information such as we publish a monthly progress report. We also have an overview of the Safety Valve programme. So that graphic that's on the bottom right of the screen is like a high level update around the programme and what the work is. And then the Safety Valve project summaries, if there's one document to look at and share with your constituents, with any of your stakeholders or networks, it would be the project summaries. So we essentially have a plan on the page for each of the 18 projects. And what that does is detailed, what is the project? What's the rationale for this? What are the objectives? What's the financial saving attached to this? And what are the resources and timescales? So it's really clear, plan on the page for each project. In terms of additional BAU, I think I mentioned this already. So we had a session with councillors and a specific session with governors last week. So in terms of overall progress to date, we do have 18 projects, but I just thought it'd be worth just highlighting some quite key updates in the last couple of months. So project A1 is all about speech and language communication and implementing a graduated response. So what we have now done is we've identified our training needs for the workforce, we've developed our tools and our approaches, and we're looking to roll that out from the next academic year, starting in September. We've recruited language assistants who will be supporting with that work in terms of encouraging us all to be very clear about what is the universal offer in terms of support, targeted, and then preventing the need for a specialist response, although those children who do need a specialist response will receive that. And we're engaging our SENCOs in primary schools to help us deliver that graduated pathway. In terms of project A2, so working with young people, autistic children and young people in schools where there is a risk of their placement breaking down within a mainstream setting. So we have expanded our language and autism team to specifically focus on working with those schools where we think there's a risk of breakdown and helping that to not happen. Those posts have been recruited to and they're delivering that work now and have had a number of referrals coming to them since it's been implemented. In terms of social, emotional, and mental health pathway, so we have a cluster group with our SENCOs across the borough. We have a pilot in place with one of those cluster groups, and they are developing a pathway around how we can have a graduated response, a collaborative approach to supporting young people with social, emotional, and mental health. That is up and running now. And in terms of annual reviews, we've completed some analysis to really understand what are some of the barriers to ensuring that annual reviews are completed within timescale. So you can see the approach that we've taken with education and healthcare plans. That's gone from as low as 38% to over 80% within the month. For our annual reviews, it's actually improved since this position. So this is the May report. It's now 69% of annual reviews are completed within timescales, which is again is an improved position. And that's really as a result of understanding our challenges and investing the resources within there. Other projects is really delighted about this one. So in terms of young people having SEND supported internships, we had a target to develop 12 new apprenticeships by September. And I think Mary told me the other day, we've now got 16. So that's great that we've exceeded that target. We're looking to have 65 over the next 5 years on top of our existing apprenticeship program, SEND supported internships program. Preparation for adulthood is making very good progress in all 4 areas. So in health, employment, education and benefits, community relationships and independent living and housing. And we're also looking to develop to strengthen our transitions model to make sure that young people are really truly prepared for adulthood. In terms of our bandings and top-ups, we've been doing a lot of work with our early year settings in our schools to develop descriptors. So really focusing on children's needs rather than focusing on the financial envelope, which will come at a separate stage. We've piloted those. There's been a lot of at least 6 months work to develop those banding descriptors, involving our parents and carers and our professionals and our SEND specialists. And they've now been tested within primary, secondary and post-16 settings. In terms of capital projects, we are looking to develop 118 new places across the borough with 5 resource provision, all focused on autism and social emotional mental health. We have had expressions of interest for all 5 of those projects, and we're just working with our settings to just understand a bit more detail and make sure that they can progress to the feasibility stage. And from that, then we determine a cabinet report that will come back in September, outlining the proposals for that and approval to progress with those projects. Alternative provision, we're progressing with that. We are tightening up our processes in terms of making sure we've got robust service level agreements in place, governance structures, and also making sure that we're expanding our alternative provision offer, because we know that not one model suits all of our children. So looking at different providers that we can work with within the borough. We are, as part of our SEND sufficiency strategy, looking at all of our placements for young people post-16. We know that our offer for young people post-16 is not good enough within the borough, hence why a lot of our young people go out of borough. So the SEND sufficiency strategy is helping us to really think about what is the demand, what is the need, and will inform our commissioning intentions going forward. And part of that is to review all of our post-16 placements in terms of the type of provision they're accessing, but also where they're accessing that provision. And then all of our projects within Workstream C are not necessarily about will result in achieving any savings, but they absolutely are about achieving that culture change. So that real engagement, that systemic approach, that collaborative response to really thinking about how we become more inclusive and support our children at a much earlier stage within the borough. The other thing to say about bandings and top-ups that I forgot to mention earlier is that we will be making a disapplication request not to pass on the inflation rate for the top-ups for our special schools. And that equates to 3.4% and a saving for the authority of 420,000 a year for the lifetime of the programme. And we've made that decision based on robust analysis that shows us that whilst our top-up rates for special schools are comparable with those out of borough, we have a flat rate for all of our children regardless of need. So a child A with a lower level of need gets the same allocation of funding as a child E, with a much higher level of need. So we're just trying to introduce some parity with that as part of the bandings and top-ups. And so that really brings us to the end of just a very high level quick update. But I think the thing to give you reassurance of is that I do feel that this programme is very well communicated and engaging a whole range of stakeholders in this work. But I do recognise the anxiety that this brings. So as officers, it really has been our job to make sure that along the way, this is very much focused on service improvement and outcomes for children. And as a result of that, the savings will follow, because the financial envelope remains and the financial challenges remain in terms of the budgetary pressures that we face. Any questions? Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Jackie. I think basically all of the questions that were raised with us both, like as ward councillors and in our other roles, is the communication around, but you seems to have captured, like reflected that really well. So I think the communication with all the relevant stakeholders, it's happening efficiently. And yeah, I think it will be good to obviously have regular progress update reports for this committee as well, for us to have an opportunity to comment and contribute. Any questions? Yeah, Lottie.
Well, initially a statement. So really you're seeing this as a culture shift within the education system here in Haringey, that we are looking at children holistically as far as speech and language teaching and training is concerned. Am I correct in interpreting it in that way?
Absolutely. I mean, speech and language therapy is one of the 18 projects, but it is a culture shift nationally is the direction of travel. And I think what we are seeing here in Haringey is an absolute commitment from our stakeholders. We've got very good relationships across education, health and care, and with our parents and carers. And I have really seen the shift over the last 12 months in terms of being behind this programme, because we know that do nothing is not an option.
Jackie, that sounds absolutely wonderful. Couldn't applaud the concept anymore. I have a few questions about how are we training our teachers within that? Sorry, Anne.
Just to say, it is a culture shift, but it's also a whole system change too. So we could just change the culture and not change the processes and systems. We could do a little bit of that, but it's absolutely a whole system and really follows the culture. Just wanted to, yeah.
How may I, Chair, is that right? So with that in mind, how are we teaching the teachers? Because if this has got to be every teacher, hasn't it?
So we're very fortunate in Haringey that the standard of the curriculum is very high and our schools are very inclusive in terms of the quality of teaching and learning. The work that we are doing is around being very clear about how we improve the support to schools and settings in engaging with children with SEND and some of those more specialist areas. So part of Workstream C is one of our 4 projects in that band is that we're improving our workforce development plan that we commissioned through Haringey Education Partnership. And we're using that it's informed by our audit activity, what our data is telling us, what our family is telling us, what our schools are telling us. And that's resulted in a much more comprehensive and a rich plan to support our schools and settings to support children with SEND. So that is one of our projects. And I don't think that's live yet, but we're due to start that from September, that new plan.
Thank you. And also see that you're going to be recruiting speech and language assistants. Isn't there a lack of those at the moment?
So we're recruiting the new posts, speech and language assistants. So we've had a really successful pilot in Northumberland Park to support early years speech and language acquisition. And we're going to roll that out into the language and autism support team and also into the therapist team. So we've got a complementary suite of skills across the system. So the new posts, we haven't had them before.
Councillor, I just want to ask a question of my own team, that because there is a shortage of speech and language therapists, that's why we're opting for these other posts. Would that be correct?
And slightly different role and responsibility. So without getting too techy about the detail, we're redesigning the pathway for speech and language therapy. So there'll be early intervention and support, which is the sort of Haringey Speaks, encouraging everybody to create language-rich environments. And at the top end, there's the very specialist individual therapy done by therapists, and in between we've created a new targeted intervention and support approach, which will have language support assistants overseen by speech and language therapists, but helping schools with delivering evidence-based interventions for children whose speech, language and communication is delayed.
So it is a whole system change. So when Councillor Brabazon spoke about Get Haringey Talking in the Park, that's part of the culture change. Certainly the ambition is that everybody, this is my personal ambition, that everybody puts their devices down. The team have heard this from me a load of times, and we speak to children and young people, and may I say that when we're in rooms like this, we have our devices on and we're not talking anymore. It is true. I came in at 6:30 and everybody was on their devices. 7 o'clock, I'm sorry. Whereas if we go back 4 years ago, we came in and we said, hello, how are you? So, I want us to So be sure we talk and talk. It's my personal ambition.
I just wanted to add one of the little comments to that, just to be clear around our speech therapist provision. So Haringey Services actually had quite good rates of both retention and recruitment. So it is very challenging to recruit therapists, but the Haringey Services retained its workforce very well. The support assistance roles overseen by the therapists and additional specialist teaching capacity are an expansion of our offer. So we're not looking to put in sort of lower grade roles to offset the fact that we can't get therapists. So I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't any confusion on that point. Thank you.
And just to add, it's not verbal speech, it's communicate however we communicate is what I mean, just that communicate and not just on devices.
Okay, Yvonne, you will be next. Yeah.
Thank you. How does this roll out in secondary schools when you seem to be focusing on speech and language as the sort of solution? How does that roll out within secondary schools where perhaps the immediate speech and language issues may not be there anymore and the issues might be behavioural?
I think I'm probably best placed to answer that, Councillor. So I think it's really important to note that speech and language therapy part of the safety valve is just one part of a series of projects. It's one we're focusing on because we've got immediate timescales for delivery in September, but there are a number of projects which sit in what we call work stream A, which are designed to enable young people to have their needs met at the earliest possible opportunity. So project, and I think it's A3, is about improving social, emotional and mental health pathways. And actually, when we're talking about our young people in secondary education, we know that while speech and language and communication is a huge, it's 23% of our requests for assessment in primary. When we're looking at secondary school age children, the big driver for assessment and support for children within the SEND system is around their social, emotional, mental health. And that's why we're focusing on that alongside of this pathway. And we can bring back an update about that as the programme progresses. I think we brought speech and language as an example and deep dive tonight because it's absolutely front and centre of what we're doing in this tranche of delivery, but it's a 5-year programme.
Yvonne, you had a question.
I understand that there are a lot of children that need speech and language. How are you going to cope with the children that don't speak the language? Are you going to have linguists there to actually translate what's from the English into their language until they can get, you know, a grip of what is going on? Because a lot of children are being left behind because they don't really know how to handle that side of it yet, because there's so many languages. You know, you can understand why parents are up in arms.
So I think we're really mindful that one of the things that we have to deal with as an additional complexity in Haringey Send is always children who come in and enter the education system who speak additional languages. And I think we're extremely lucky. Our speech and language therapists and our schools are extremely skilled at differentiating between children who are learning a second language, but who otherwise have developmentally typical learning needs, and children who are not able to speak very well in either language. And we will triangulate information, particularly with parents, about what language development looks like in the child's spoken language at home, alongside of how their development is appearing in school. Because what we know is children who are multilingual often do better academically, but only after the age of 12. So there's a period where acquiring 2 languages takes a lot of brain space, and then children become incredibly academically able, I think, as a result of being able to use multiple languages. But it can work as a way of if you don't assess thoroughly, you can miss the fact that children aren't making normal developmental progress, and that's why that triangulation is really important. But our speech and language therapy team across NCL are really adept at screening for that, and it's part of the standard screening that the speech and language therapy service do routinely.
Great. So I don't see any other hands. Yeah, Jackie, thank you very much for the update. And yeah, I'm sure going forward we will have regular updates about how the program are doing. And yeah, great. Thank you very much. I'll now move to item 12, scrutiny. You'll recall that couple of years ago, we did a scrutiny review on child poverty, and basically that report was subsequently presented to the cabinet, and cabinet accepted most of the recommendation of the report. Now we are having this opportunity to have an update on the implementation of some of the recommendation, and for that I'll call Jean Taylor to give us a 5 minutes presentation. Then we will have comments and recommendations as well. Jill.
Thanks, Councillor, and thank you for inviting me along this evening. So as you've indicated, the report that's in your packs this evening represents an update on all of the important recommendations that were made by this committee as part of a commission into child poverty, which reported in November of last year. So what you'll see is that there and you'll be, many of you will be very aware, having sat on that kind of commission, is that there are a wide range of recommendations that were captured in your final report. And what we've sought to do is to provide a detailed update on each of those recommendations. I won't go into a great deal of detail about the report. I'll kind of leave for you to ask the kind of questions that are important to you. But I suppose there's probably 3 important things to bring your attention to, particularly, arguably. The first is the ongoing work within the council to respond to cost of living pressures. We know that these have had a really significant impact on our residents and kind of families, and that there have been a range of disproportionate impacts on families with children and young people. Those impacts are ongoing, and the kind of the projections into the kind of future around child poverty are kind of sobering. Our expectation is that levels of child poverty, if some of the impacts that we're seeing continue to roll out and without intervention, will exacerbate. So child poverty continues to be a really live and important issue, and one that's of significant concern. So the work that we described back in November about a coordinated response to cost of living pressures from across the council has continued until very recently. As part of a recent discussion, though, what we've sought to recognise is that the cost of living crisis is not a short-lived Big Bang crisis. I think we would all be aware that it's one that is likely to continue for the foreseeable future as a result of a range of different drivers. As such, we are undertaking some work to think about how we reframe our response. To recognise kind of the longer term and ongoing impact of the kind of cost of living crisis in a context of a borough where we did have kind of high levels of pre-existing poverty, and where COVID, as the previous kind of crisis, had a disproportionate impact. The aim of the work that we are looking at on poverty will be to identify the kind of the levers that are available to us that are likely to have the kind of greatest impact in mitigating poverty, but also really important in seeking to kind of prevent it for in the future and for future generations. And in that context, we're anticipating that there will be a really kind of strong focus on both responding to the impact of children and young people in poverty now, but also kind of looking at their long-term life chances and social mobility, and again, the kind of the levers available to us in that context. The sort of second kind of part of the update, just to bring your attention to, relates to Haringey kind of community goals. I'm not the best person to speak to that. You know, Jackie is kind of very much kind of the owner of that work, but you'll see the kind of the important work that there has been to embed the work of that kind of program, and to secure kind of funding into 2025. Finally, you'll all, I'm sure, be aware of the London Mayor's kind of commitment to universal free school meals at primary level for the duration of next academic year. And you'll see that we are working with our kind of schools to support the implementation of that policy change, including to begin to think about what happens when that fixed term funding comes to an end. So I won't go into a great deal of additional detail on top of that. Obviously, really happy to take any questions that I can answer, and also there are obviously kind of colleagues in the room who may be better placed to respond on some of the recommendations. So thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you very much for the update, Jill. One of the recommendation was, incidentally, it was about a universal free school meal for all primary school children. But at that time, obviously, we knew that the constraints council had in rolling out to universally. I mean, they have agreed to extend the number of children that could receive free school meals. So it was really good that that action, that recommendation was fulfilled by Mayor London, which is really good. Any questions and comment? Councillor Abella? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I was interested in following up on a point you made. You mentioned that you'll be looking into what levers the council has at its disposal to improve to increase social mobility. And I was wondering if you already have a sense of what those levers might be, and if you could share some of your initial thinking on that.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor. So I mean, I think it's worth saying that kind of that work is in its very kind of early stage. But you know, we'd be very kind of you know, I think we would kind of understand from the outset that there are kind of a number of levers available to us, many of which we've kind of touched on today, that are really significant in social mobility, education, and what happens in our schools, with sort of students being provided with the kind of the best possible education, and with a range of specific needs being kind of responded to, being a really kind of critical kind of set of factors that determine people's life chances. We'd also kind of understand that kind of support on kind of transitions is important, particularly when it kind of comes to kind of thinking about kind of the world of work and kind of what opportunities available to our young people in that. And then, you know, and then of course, you know, it's not just kind of what happens as part of the kind of formal kind of school day, but also about kind of what kind of the opportunities are that young people are kind of exposed to kind of outside of school. That's something where we maybe, you know, arguably have less kind of direct levers. But you know, but things like our kind of holiday schemes do kind of seek to expose kind of children who may be less likely to kind of get opportunities to try their hand at different kind of activities, and to kind of really really kind of succeed in kind of whether it's kind of sport or kind of arts activity, to give them that opportunity. We will be progressing that work over the coming months. There's no kind of formal time scale yet, kind of agreed to that, but we'll certainly be looking at more, in more detail, at the full kind of range of available levers that we can draw on, with as I've said, a really kind of strong focus on, where with kind of, unfortunately limited resource, can we have the absolute kind of greatest impact on child poverty.
Thank you for that. Lords, you've got your hands up.
Jean, I don't know whether it's a common problem with other chairs, but with at St Ignatius, we already have real difficulty in getting our parents to understand the link between access to free school meals and pupil premium. And our pupil premium for the past 18 months has really gone down. We'd appreciate any help that you can give us, because once it's announced and our parents understand that it's free school meals for the whole of the years of primary, I think we're going to even suffer even less of applications coming through the door. So if you can think of any way that we can reach out to these parents. We've tried a number of things and nothing's working at the moment, but I mean, in some ways it's unfortunate that free school meals is attached to pupil premium, but any ideas we'd really appreciate.
Yeah. Thank you, Lawrence.
Sorry, Jean. Also,
Yes.
Councillor Brabazon wants to come on this question as well.
Yes.
So she
I
might
think
have-
I may be more on top of this than you, Jean, because we've been having the free school meals working group, which I should have mentioned in my summary of what's going on at the beginning of the meeting. But because of the Mayor's initiative around free school meals for all primary from September 23 to July 24, we're having a working group. Anna, you're on it, and some other councillor, Ibrahim is on it as well, representing backbenchers. And I think we've got a head teacher. I'm not sure we have before you say it, Laws, I'm not sure if there's a governor. I think there might be, but I'll double check. And if there isn't, we'll plug that gap. But where we are is that one of the things that's come up is the whole issue of the recruitment, the identification of parents. And we're currently, the officers are now revising the form, because it's really interesting how much things really rely on the form. So what we've had is a system where schools have chased the parents, but now we're going to move to have the admissions team chase the parents. So it's managed centrally by the council, because if parents give us their NI number at the very start of their school career, you've got the key thing you need, which is the NI number, because that links to the DWP data and so on. But people have to give their permission, and I have to give it. But hopefully we can persuade them to do that, but take the onus away from the schools and bring it to the centre. And that is a much more sensible way of doing things than having someone chase somebody around a playground. Be much better to do it when they're applying for reception, or indeed with a register for nursery, because once you've got it, you've got it. And the younger the children, the better the relationship. And, you know, the local authority has been very, very good at managing reception admissions. They don't manage nursery admissions, schools do that. But I think that we will get a much better result. So that's the plan. The officers are doing that now, and that's come as a result of the working group. We're also having a massive campaign, an FSM campaign, which I think has been very creative. Sorry, Jean, I didn't know if you knew all that, so I apologise if you knew all that.
No, you've done a much better job of covering that than I would have done. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Don't know whether it'll be helpful to you, but about 6, 7 years ago, when we had a crisis before, we sent a letter out, parents, to all the head teachers of all the schools, and asking them to bring in the uniforms that they don't use at all, or if they're too small. And we collected them up, and we were able to kit out nearly 200 children with the second-hand clothes. So I don't know if that is, there's got to be a base where they can drop them if the school closes, so that it can be opened. It's just like a jumble sale, I suppose, really. Yeah.
I think that's definitely a good idea in terms of like maybe school can be encouraged to share resources, like, you know, exchange uniforms or sell, because in the context of cost of living crisis, some families will need, and, you know, uniforms are uniforms if they're not still in good condition. Next child can
Well, you
wear. I
just
think
throw them
schools
out
can
when they
definitely
come
be encouraged
Yeah.
to basically take that action. Is that, Lords, would it be possible to kind of encourage the schools that you work with, like just to see what's the mood for that?
In terms of clothes, well, I can remember going to the wonderful afternoon, I think Zena arranged it, where she had the cabinet go to Gladesmore. And I was talking to the children, well, the young people rather than children, and that Gladesmore have got such a system, and it's done very, very well indeed. And it's really organised, and they use certain lockers, so children know they don't even have to ask for help or whatever. They know which lockers to go to, whatever. And this sort of came up that afternoon, because I think the whole theme was cost of living and sort of suggestions. And the young people were very positive about that. But I don't know whether other secondary schools do it. We certainly don't. We do help people, but we don't do it in an organised way.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Any other questions for Jill? Jean? No? Okay. There's no more question, Jean. Thank you very much for the update on the progress of the report. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Yes, but there is a question for Anne. Yeah, two actually. Yeah.
I was just wondering whether we have a sort of policy with schools in Haringey about period poverty. There has been discussion about it, and I think but I'm not sure if it's rolled out. Bev, I'm looking to you. This has come to the HSCP, but I'm not sure how far it got. It might have come as an information piece for us to consider, but I think we might have taken it round to each of the schools. But I'm aware of it, but I can't say yes that it's rolled out through all our schools.
It's not rolled out to all of our schools, but it might be helpful if I come back through Rob with a written note on what schools it's in. Our Swiss social workers have been leading some of this, so I'll come back to you via Rob.
To Jean.
You have another question coming.
Could we have something like a shoe bank? Because, you know, uniforms, you know, that can be school based, but shoes are, you know, usually the most expensive form of uniform.
Beverly got her hand up and she
Oh.
wants to also come on that. But if you've got a response, like if you would like to come in, if there's anything relevant in your area, then you could do that. But yeah.
About a shoe bank, but we have had a relationship with the Deborah Rees Foundation. And just wrote me a note, as I was saying, didn't even look, which has been fantastic. You know, Rees, the clothing family, they the family are in Haringey, and they set up a charity in memory of one of their family who died, and they're absolutely wonderful. I really can't praise them enough. All they want is to give clothing and to children in our schools, and we've had coats. We've done coats. We've done winter kits. We've done trainers. We've done, what else have we done? I can't think what else. I think those are the main things we've done. That the
coats twice.
Coats twice. We've done coats, winter coats. And the kits were a really good idea. Winter warmer kits, trainers, they were really popular. And different schools are selected for each round. So we're going through them and in the, you know, according to the rankings of child poverty. And it's been fantastic, absolutely wonderful programme to assist the families. So I hope that, well, I hope it will continue.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for that.
It's
Councillor
better than
Robinson. Yeah. Beverly, did you also wanted to say something?
It's all the kids in the school. There's no,
Probably
there's no
answered the
stigma.
question. We need to, yeah, sorry. Thank you very much, Jean. Yeah, all great. And I'm sure going forward, there will be further updates on various other things that you deal with, especially like in regards to like the update on the especially if there are changes in terms of like updating the borough plan and what's the need, if there are any changes for the children and young people strategy, then we would like to be updated or informed about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we are back to item 13, work program update. I think at this point, officers and Councillor Brabazon, you're more than welcome to, leave if you feel like it. You've done your fair share. Thank you so much for, yeah, all the updates and good work. Work plan, Rob.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a couple of things just to mention. We're coming to towards the end of the review on physical activity and sport. We've 2 more evidence sessions scheduled, one on the 11th, one on the 18th of July. On the 11th, we're hoping to hear from the Tottenham Hotspur Foundation, and we will be hearing from the Selby Trust about the work they do in the borough. And I think at the evidence session last Thursday, somebody asked, I think the issue of cricket development came up, and I've been sent a cricket development plan for the borough to complement the pitches that have been set up. The council has been working with the English Cricket Board and the MCC to develop this plan. It's fairly detailed, so I shall send that round. The final meeting on the 18th of July will be to come up with conclusions and recommendations. I'll try and draw together all the pieces of information that we've had so far ahead of that, so you can have a look through it and think about possible recommendations and conclusions. For the next scheduled meeting of the panel, which is on the 21st of September, there's a number of potential items. First, the Stephen search. Secondly, Harringay Youth Justice Strategic Plan.
Yeah.
Which we must, which we need to flag up. Skills and careers, and mental health and well-being. And we will do what we normally do is we'll arrange an agenda planning meeting between the chair and officers in the children and young people's service. Happy to receive any comments, suggestions, etc., etc.
Any comments? Any comments, both from here or from the screen? Or are we sort of happy with what's been recommended? No, I think everybody seems to be happy. So on that note, I would like to bring this meeting to the end. Thank you very much, councillors, co-optees, and officers, Rob. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Bye.
Hey, Lords, have a good evening.
Thanks.